Right, so Sony is having an absolutely generational run of just pure bullshit. As if the Bungie layoffs weren't bad enough, they've just made two equally, if not more egregious announcements. The first being that physical disc production is going to end by January 2028. And the second being that the PS3 and the Vita stores are going to close by July 2027. On the physical disc production, I think, these game manufacturers have been heavily hinting towards it, the fact that you sort of have to opt in for a physical edition of a console. On top of the fact that, to be honest, a lot of physical games are sort of a facade at this point with day one patches, always online features. I miss the days of just being able to pick up a PS2 game like Ratchet & Clank. I'm a huge Ratchet & Clank fan. Boot it up on the PS2, just be able to play it, on the same day you bought it. And the fact that I can go and pick up that same copy of Ratchet & Clank 2, put it into my PS2 and boot it up now and have the exact same experience as I did 20 years ago, I think is an awesome piece of preservation that we're going to be losing. Another sentimental thing about physical media for me is that, my wife and I, we've recently gotten into Resident Evil and we collect the steel books. And if there's no disc in the steel book and it's a copy of a code, I'm a lot less inclined to, buy a physical game and have it take up space in my house if all it does is have a representation of something virtual. It's also going to hit home in the sense of our game stores, our local game stores. For me, at least where I am in the world, already my local game store, and it's not a franchise or anything like that, but my local game store already only has mostly PS5 titles. The Xbox and Nintendo sections are far smaller. So, when this goes away, I shudder to think what will happen to, the mom and pop game stores of the world. And most importantly, when it comes to physical media, at least in the game space, it's something that holds Sony accountable. When it comes to game sales, they're sort of forced to make game sales because you can go out and buy a secondhand copy of a mainline release, a AAA game that typically $70 in the store. I mean, I'll put up some examples, but even in my most recent experience, I bought Dragon Ball Sparking Zero at half the price, and I have never seen that game on a sale higher than 30%, if that. And I shudder to think what Sony is capable of, because they don't have the best track record, unfortunately. What they're capable of when physical media is gone. They can pull the plug whenever they want. They can never have another sale. I doubt that'll be the case. That extra layer of insurance is going to be completely gone. And whether you've already gone fully digital or not, this is something that you benefit from. Whether you think about it actively in your day-to-day or not. If you only have a PS5 digital or you only buy games on Steam, they have to remain competitive because there is a market, a second-hand market where physical games are more affordable. It's easy to think in today's market that everyone's buying games at full price, but it's just simply not true. A lot of us wait for sales, and a lot of those sales are driven by the fact that you can go out and buy these things for far less than what they are on the digital store. Onto the store closures, the reason given, I think, is just absolute BS. The reason of they can't support the modern day payment processing methods anymore. That just sounds like an excuse to be able to shut these stores down so they no longer have to maintain them. And with that dies thousands of PS3 exclusives. The fact of the matter is there were many PS3 games that didn't have physical media, and post July 2027, there's no way you can buy these games. It's going to be gone forever. It's not going to be rare. I guess maybe you can buy a PlayStation with the game on it. Like frickin' buying a phone with Flappy Bird on it. I mean, it's just going to be ludicrous. I can only imagine the egregious pricing that people are going to come up with for, games that only exist on their consoles. I think if there was a a plan by Sony to save what could potentially be lost, then it would be an easier blow. You know, with today's technology, I know the PlayStation is a notoriously difficult console. I know it had all the multi-threading bullshit that they came up with, and, you know, for the time was actually really innovative. And the PS3 is one of the consoles, at least is one of my favorite consoles from Sony, and what made me such a Sony fanboy was the pure power of the PS3. I still have an original PS3, but now I'm getting sidetracked. I know it is difficult to port those games, but it's possible. You know, if emulators exist on PC, which they do, and let's be honest, the PS5 is just a PC. You know, all these things are. I can't see why, even if the ports aren't great, if they're choppy, run at 30 FPS, whatever the case may be, I can't see why we can't at least try to bring these things across. I think the most heinous fact of all of this is that the PS4 back in 2013 launched with this promise. You know, Xbox went so hard on their digital features that PS4 launched an entire campaign to show that, you know, you can buy a disc, you can do what you want with the disc, you are the owner of that piece of media, you can lend it to a friend, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want with it. It's your piece of property. And it's just sad to see that they've gone back on their word. It's really, it makes me wonder if supporting Sony going forward is going to be part of, you know, my gaming chapter. To close out, I just want to highlight the issues that I feel are most prevalent, and that's, you know, us renting games and not owning them. And in that, there's this sort of hidden expiry that no one agreed to. You know, if they wanted to, and I'm not saying they would, and to be honest, it would probably be an entire legal case, but effectively, they could pull the plug tomorrow, and all those games you bought would just be gone forever. There's a lot of games I bought on the PlayStation 3 that would just disappear, and when I bought them back in, you know, the mid-2000s, I didn't sign anything that said, feel free to frickin' delete it in 20 years from now. I'm sure it existed knowing Sony somewhere in there, fine print. I'm not sure what the correct way forward is, if there even is a way forward. I know there's movements in Europe that I support, you know, for games preservation. I just can't stop coming back to the fact that back in the day we could just pick up a game, put it in, play it, and all these years later I can do that exact same thing. And it's just not possible anymore. It feels like something's been taken away from us, and we're okay with it, and we shouldn't be.